Let's talk about what foods you really need to avoid in pregnancy. And at the end, we'll go over how some of the more common foods you've been told to avoid might not exactly be off the menu. The first thing you should absolutely be avoiding is alcohol. If you drink alcohol in excess, there is the potential for the baby to have a lot of health problems and developmental issues from fetal alcohol syndrome. Alcohol also offers no nutritional benefit, which is something you should really be considering when you're choosing to eat or drink anything. So not only does this not offer any nutritional benefit, but it can also cause a lot of harm to the baby. The second thing we'll talk about is caffeine, and this can be from coffee, soda, tea, or any other source like dark chocolate. And this can be a touchy subject for many, but what's really important to know is that caffeine does cross the placenta. So the caffeine levels of the baby will roughly match that of mom. It's also really important to know that high levels of caffeine in pregnancy can decrease the amount of nutrients that get to the baby by disrupting and decreasing the placental blood flow. Many years ago, studies looking at high intake of caffeine related it to higher chances and increased risk of miscarriage, stillbirth, and low birth weight. This led to the blanket recommendation that women have no more than 200 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is approximately equal to 12 to 16 ounces of coffee. Everyone has a different metabolism of caffeine, so this really ends up being pretty personalized. If you're someone who's very sensitive, the recommendation is to keep it very minimal to none at all. But for those of you who really love your cup of coffee in the morning, you have to keep it below 200 milligrams, and keeping in mind that 12 ounces of coffee is usually the general small that you're getting out in store. So make sure you're keeping it between 12 and 16 ounces or below that. Also, make sure you check for any sneaky sources of caffeine that you might not be considering, like any soda, tea, or maybe chocolate that you're eating. The third thing to avoid are refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed foods. These are going to be things like your breakfast cereals or any other refined grain product made with enriched wheat flour. The most important thing is that you're having food that is really nutrient dense. This is so you and baby get exactly what it needs so that baby can grow. These types of foods in general are really lacking in nutrients and have a lot of other crap in them. In fact, a diet rich in refined carbohydrates is the #1 predictor of a nutrient-deficient diet. It's best to limit your intake of processed foods and refined carbohydrates as much as possible, and make sure you're eating mostly whole and unprocessed foods. The fourth thing to avoid are artificial sweeteners. Eating a lot of artificial sweeteners in pregnancy can impact your baby even later on in life. These change your gut bacteria, impact your thyroid hormones, and contrary to popular belief, they can and do impact glucose levels in many people. High intake of artificial sweeteners in pregnancy can actually increase the risk of obesity in your child later on in life. If you're craving something sweet, eat something that has some real sugar, honey, or maple syrup in it. And the fifth thing to avoid are going to be seed oils. Seed oils generally produce a lot of systemic inflammation and oxidative stress, and this can contribute to gestational complications like preeclampsia and gestational diabetes. These oils can also produce harmful lipid peroxides, and these can harm the fetal development of the brain. They're also really high in omega-6s. They disrupt the omega-6 to 3 ratio. This reduces the bioavailability of DHA, which is critical for the brain, eye, and nerve system development. And now let's dive in for some real talk about the usual suspects on the foods to avoid in pregnancy lists. Deli meats, soft cheeses, and runny egg yolks have been on the foods to avoid in pregnancy lists for many years because of the risk of listeria and salmonella infections. Now, concern about these infections is warranted because they can cause a lot of pregnancy complications, including miscarriage and even death. But the important thing to understand is there are a lot of inconsistencies in the current guidelines that don't really take into account a lot of factors. For instance, women are told to completely abandon these foods altogether during their pregnancy, which can lead to them swapping out for less nutritious options. And some studies have shown that when women avoid all possible listeria-containing foods, they actually do have nutrient deficiencies in pregnancy. The guidelines also don't mention that fresh produce like fruits and vegetables are a huge source of foodborne illness. In fact, foodborne illness from leafy greens happens more often than any other food group. I could do a whole video just on this one topic breaking it down, so if you want to see that, hit me in the comments below. But the take home here is that if you're buying from a really reputable source that has good food handling practices, the absolute risk is extraordinarily low. Your risk of getting sick from contaminated eggs is about 1 in 30,000, but if you buy organic, that drops even lower. The most important thing is that you really make sure you're buying your food from reputable sources that have good food handling practices. Don't be buying anything you're unsure of at a place you've never bought from before. The other one that women are told a lot of times to avoid eating in pregnancy is fish, and that's because of the risk of mercury. However, fish has a ton of nutrient density in it, and when you stop eating fish altogether, a lot of the nutrients that are necessary for brain and eye development in baby go missing. This recommendation to avoid eating fish, to avoid getting mercury in, also ignores the fact that the vast majority of fish that we're buying in our stores and we're eating in our homes are fish that have a lot of selenium in them. And selenium binds to mercury and doesn't allow it to even get absorbed in the human body at all. So the salmon and the shrimp and the haddock and those types of things that you're getting and eating are generally not going to harm you at all with their mercury levels because of the high amounts of selenium in them. The fish you mostly want to avoid because of their high mercury levels but low selenium levels are things that you're not readily going to be able to buy. Things like pilot whale, shark, tilefish, and you'll definitely want to avoid king mackerel. Other than that, fish is on the menu. The most important thing overall is that you're getting a really nutritious diet for you and baby, and if you're smart about where you're getting your food from, buy from reputable places with good and safe food handling practices. Hope this was helpful. Leave a comment down below about things you've been told to avoid in pregnancy, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.